It all started on a Saturday morning. One of those mornings when you wake up wanting nothing more than peace. A cup of coffee that smells like a cloth filter and the light sound of the wind rustling through the trees. But peace, unfortunately, is a concept that doesn't exist when you live 3 houses away from a control-obsessed lady who thinks she lives in a luxury condominium in Beverly Hills, when in fact we're on an ordinary street in a small town, where the houses still have wooden fences and dogs bark freely. The woman in question, a dyed blonde with a haircut that looks like an 80s mommy helmet, had been looking at me funny for weeks. Not that this was anything new, she even looked at clouds that passed by too slowly. But that morning, the aura of judgment was stronger than ever. I should have known something was coming. The problem started with my generator. A big piece of junk, yes? Noisy? Maybe? Necessary? Absolutely. The city has been suffering from power outages for months, and as an electrical maintenance technician and volunteer in emergency coordination, I took it upon myself to install a backup system that would be able to supply important sectors of the city, including, and this is the most important detail of the story, the only hospital in the region. Yes, you read that right. My generator, the one that took the spiritual peace out of the morning meditation of the lady down the street, was the one that kept the respirators, the delivery room, and the neonatology ward running when the power went out. The thing is, for someone who lives in an endless loop of yoga, detox juice, and gossip in the neighborhood group, this seems irrelevant. After all, her life is more important than anyone else's, right? That Saturday morning, the generator had been running since dawn. A violent storm had knocked out the entire city's power grid. I was there, standing in the yard, monitoring the power levels, checking the cables, making sure everything was running as it should. Then I heard the noise, not the generator, but of heels hitting concrete with fury. She appeared at my gate as if she were an FBI officer on a special mission. In her hand, a printed piece of paper, which I would later discover was a noise pollution complaint report made by herself, addressed to nobody. She had literally invented her own protocol, stamped it with a red pen, and thought it was ready to become a municipal law. "It's out of control here," she said, frowning as if she'd smelled lemon. "That engine is ruining the peace of our neighborhood." I swear, for a second, I thought she was going to call for backup. I started laughing inside, not out of mockery, but because I couldn't believe it was real. She demanded that I turn off the generator immediately. Immediately. As if I were having a barbecue at a forbidden time. As if the generator was a speaker playing funk at maximum volume at 3 in the morning. As if there were literally no people alive because of that equipment. I explained, with the calm of someone who has seen a lot in his life, that the generator was on in an emergency, that the hospital was without power, and that I was responsible for keeping the system running. I talked about the contract, the authorization, everything, but she wouldn't listen. In fact, she made a point of not listening. She covered her ears like a tantruming child and said that it didn't matter because the noise was unacceptable and she had rights. Rights. Oh, how she loved that word. She called herself the moral president of the block, as if that were some kind of recognized title. The kind of person who puts a welcome sign on the door but never wants anyone around. The one who smiles at the neighborhood meeting but records a 4-minute audio in the group complaining about someone else's dog. And now, she wanted to silence a life-saving generator because the sound bothered her mornings, where she was probably doing yoga to the sound of flute music and dolphin songs. But she didn't stop there. When she saw that I wasn't going to turn off the equipment, she went berserk. She grabbed her cell phone and started filming, narrating as if she were a police reporter. She said that I was a negligent neighbor, that I was putting everyone at risk with a noisy industrial machine, and, the height of audacity, that she demanded that the police be called. And not satisfied with the show, she went on to say that she was going to collect signatures from the neighbors to file a petition with the HOA, Homeowners Association. Yes, that's right, that fiction they invent to pretend they are in charge of your life. But there's one detail this lady didn't know. The hospital that received power from my generator was the same one where her son was saved months ago during emergency surgery. A rare, very serious case. I remember it well because I was there myself, accompanying the maintenance team when they installed the new contingency cables. She cried in the hallway that day. She knelt down. She prayed, gave thanks, and now she was here, screaming at me to turn off the generator. Look, if irony could kill, I would have fallen hard by now. When the woman left my gate that Saturday, I thought that was the end of the clowning. I was wrong. She'd just gone to get some ammunition. The next day, I woke up to 3 notifications on my cell phone. One was an email from the HOA. Another was a message from an unknown number saying that I was under investigation for misuse of large equipment in a residential area. And the third was a video. Yes, she posted it in the neighborhood group, on Facebook, and even had the nerve to tag the official City Hall profile. The video was a compilation of clips of my generator running, with alarmist captions like, "Sound pollution kills," and "Our rights are being ignored." The drama was worthy of a Mexican soap opera with a suspenseful soundtrack over the noise of the engine. But the icing on the cake came at the end of the video, with her saying, "This dangerous equipment must be immediately removed from this quiet neighborhood. We don't want power plants on our sidewalks." Power plant. The woman called my generator a power plant, the same woman who calls portable heaters hazardous infrastructure when her neighbor warms his feet in winter. My first reaction was to laugh, but the second was to realize that things could escalate, and it did. Because a few hours later, I received a notice from an HOA officer asking me to attend an emergency meeting to discuss infractions against the collective welfare. Yes, the woman moved heaven, earth, and hell in less than 24 hours. She had time to draw up a petition, which I later found out only had 3 signatures. Her apathetic husband who seems to live under constant threat of being poisoned, and a neighbor who has never left the house since 2011, sent a copy of the video to the HOA coordinator and even hand-delivered a letter to the town hall office. All because my generator was bothering the birds in her garden. The HOA meeting was an experience worthy of psychological study. I arrived with the documents in hand, including the contract we signed with the hospital, the terms of authorization issued by the town hall, and a technical report from the engineer who installed the system, saying that everything was up to standard. I thought, that's it. I'll show them everything. They'll understand. Give her a chair tea and life will go on. Sweet illusion. The meeting began with her making an impassioned speech. She stood up, slammed her hand on the table as if she were defending a bill at the UN, and started talking as if she were a spokesperson for the Green UN, Greenpeace, and the National Institute for Soft Sound. She said that the noise from the generator was affecting the mental health of the residents, that the constant sound was preventing their hydrangeas from growing, and that her son had been having nightmares about motors ever since it started working. At that moment, I looked away. Her son is 23, drives a noisy Mustang, and listens to a trap with a subwoofer that sounds like it's going to blow a hole in the asphalt. But of course, his trauma was the life-saving generator. When it was my turn to talk, I got straight to the point. I showed him all the documents, explained that the equipment was not a personal whim, but part of an officially approved emergency plan, that the city's hospital depended on the power from my system when the grid went down, and that disconnecting it would mean putting lives at risk, including that of the grandson of the neighbor signing the petition, who was born prematurely 2 months ago and spent 7 days in the neonatal ICU. Most of the HOA members were visibly uncomfortable. Some pretended to fiddle with their cell phones, others stared at the ceiling, until one of the more sensible ones, Mr. Jacobs, opened his mouth and said, "Well, if it's legal and benefits the hospital, there's nothing more to discuss." But the woman, that unstoppable figure, didn't care. She unleashed the most absurd sentence of the night. And since when is the collective need of a hospital more important than the peace of a united neighborhood? The silence that filled the room after that was almost comical. The kind of silence that only comes when someone says something so monumentally stupid that no one knows whether to respond or call the ambulance. She carried on talking, as if she hadn't just said that lives at risk came after her plants. She said that if the HOA didn't take action, she would take the case to higher courts. All I could think about was how upside down the world was, because it wasn't just a neighbor complaining about the noise. It was a woman who was literally ignoring the impact of this on an entire hospital community, on patients, doctors, and nurses who relied on that energy when all else failed. I left the meeting without any sanctions, of course, but I also left with one certainty. She wasn't going to stop, and I was right. 2 days later, she showed up in my yard with 2 policemen. Yes, the woman called the police. She knocked on the door of the police station with the same Facebook video and a printed letter in which she said that she lived in fear and that she was the victim of noise intimidation. And as absurd as it sounds, the police came. Not because they believed her, but because they needed to check, as is customary. And even the 2 officers, while looking at the generator and listening to my explanation, had to stop themselves from laughing. "So, this feeds the hospital?" one of them asked. "Exactly. It's even on because the central transformer is still out of operation. If it goes off, the emergency room will be dark." He jotted something down in a notebook and muttered, "And she wanted you to turn it off?" "Yes, because it gets in the way of her afternoon tea." The other policeman let out a chuckle and masked it with a wheeze. "Well, I don't think there's any crime here. We'll leave it on the record just for protocol's sake, but you can get on with your work." And so it went. But that wasn't the end of it. It was just a warning that the woman was about to do something even more idiotic, more desperate, and more dangerous. If I thought that the visit from the police had been the peak of this woman's outburst, it was because I hadn't yet seen what she was really capable of when she felt ignored. Because after that episode, she went into apocalypse mode. She started watching me, literally. You know that feeling that someone is watching you even when you turn the corner? And it wasn't paranoia. I started to notice her shadow behind the curtains in her living room every time I walked down the street. No matter what time it was, morning, noon, night, she was always there. Sometimes with binoculars, and no, that's not an exaggeration, really binoculars. It looked like she was spying on the Pentagon and not monitoring some poor guy trying to keep the city breathing. And she didn't stop there. She started approaching neighbors, one by one, in front of houses, at the market, even at the gas station. She poured out her monologue full of lies, saying that I was sabotaging the tranquility of the neighborhood, that I had suspicious connections with the town hall, and, most unbelievable of all, that I was profiting illicitly from the suffering of others. In other words, she turned my collaboration with the hospital into a corruption scheme invented by her own disturbed mind. The final straw came when I discovered that she had created a website. That's right, she registered a domain, created a website from scratch, probably with the help of some teenage nephew she manipulated with promises of inheritance, and published a page with the title, "Stop the Noise," a manifesto, a real open letter to civil society oppressed by the industrial sound that threatens our children and our gardens. She used a photo of my yard taken without authorization, put red arrows pointing at the generator as if it were a weapon of war, and ended the text with an online petition demanding the immediate removal of the criminal equipment. In the first week, it had 7 signatures. 7, 3 of which were clearly invented names. Even so, she paraded around the neighborhood as if she had won a plebiscite. She started wearing a T-shirt with the words "Noise Kills" emblazoned across the chest. She distributed leaflets. She installed a sign in front of her house saying, "Abusive, noise-free zone," all with an aesthetic that seemed straight out of an apocalyptic cult, disguised as a condominium meeting. Meanwhile, I was trying to stay calm. I kept looking after the generator, checking the cables, updating the technical reports for the hospital's central office, as I always did. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. She'd gone off the deep end. The obsession was turning into something dangerous. And then came the low blow. One Wednesday afternoon, while I was out, she came into my yard. Yes, she did. She jumped the fence. Or had someone jump it? I still don't know. And put a chain on the generator. A chain with a padlock. She locked the equipment, as if it were her property. And not content with that, she stuck a notice on it, laminated with thick adhesive tape, written in big letters. Banned for illegal sound pollution activity. Soon to be removed. And she signed it with her name. When I arrived and saw that, I was in shock. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. But then the hospital phone rang. Emergency. The power had fluctuated in the neonatal unit, and the technical team couldn't restore the backup circuit. The reason? The main source, my generator, had been disconnected by the completely insane actions of a woman who thought she was saving the world with the power of ignorance. There, at that moment, any trace of patience I was still trying to hold on to ran out. I called the police straight away. This time, without a doubt, it was trespassing, sabotage, obstruction of a public service, the whole package. Meanwhile, I rushed to cut the chain with an electric saw I had in the basement. I didn't have time to wait for a tow truck, a locksmith, or divine authorization. In less than 5 minutes, I had reconnected the system, and the hospital was up and running again. Minutes later, I saw her arrive. She must have heard the noise of the saw, and, like a gargoyle awakened by the sound of sin, she hurried down the street, almost skipping over the sidewalks, with a phone in her hand, and an expression like she was ready to exorcise me right then and there. And she started shouting, screaming as if I were the devil himself. She said that I had committed a hostile act against a civil decision, that attacking a chain represented a symbolic aggression against collective rights, and that she was going to sue me for urban vandalism. Yes, according to her, cutting the chain that she herself had illegally put on my equipment was vandalism. And I, the resident of the house, was the criminal. The police arrived in a matter of minutes, because this time the call was classified as a priority. When they saw the sign, the padlock, the chain, and the note with her name on it, they were silent for a few seconds. One of them even scratched his head as if trying to digest the level of insanity before his eyes. I showed them the documents again, the authorizations, the reports, the photos of the system, and, of course, the hospital records that showed the power failure at exactly the moment the generator was stopped. She tried to defend herself. She really tried. She said that I had falsified the documents, that the hospital was complicit, that it was all a conspiracy. And when she saw that no one was taking her seriously, she started crying. Crying as if she were the victim in the story. The woman who locked up emergency equipment used to keep people alive, playing the martyr. Fortunately, the police didn't buy the theater. They took her to the police station to make a statement, opened an investigation, and, for the first time in a long time, I felt that reality was coming back to that part of the neighborhood. But you know what's most impressive? Even after all that, she still hasn't given up. She hadn't learned anything. She felt no shame. She didn't reflect, because the next day, she took another step, a step so absurd that to this day I wonder how a human mind can justify something like that. I wanted to say that her going to the police station was the end of this surreal soap opera. I really did. It would have been beautiful, almost poetic, if the chaos had ended there, with her being taken away to explain her actions, handcuffed, or at least with a little shame on her face. But no, shame is something that some people don't even have in emergency stock. 2 days after all this, I woke up to my cell phone vibrating like a possessed person. Message after message, people tagging me in posts, people sending me prints, people asking, "Have you seen this?" And when I opened the neighborhood group, there she was, like a phoenix of stupidity, reborn from the ashes of public humiliation, launching a new manifesto, this time with a special touch: the edited video of the supposed violence she suffered while trying to protect residents from a hostile and dangerous neighbor. The video, of course, was manipulated. Dry cuts, dramatic narration, red subtitles with phrases like, "This can happen to you," and "How long?" There was even background music. She put on a suspenseful B-movie soundtrack, the kind that sounds like someone is going to be abducted by a flying saucer on fire. In the video, she appears pointing at my generator and saying that she tried to prevent an environmental collapse, and that the response was brutality, oppression, and complicit silence from the authorities. And at the end, she even had the nerve to post a picture of herself in front of the hospital with a caption saying, "Everything I did was for them." At that point, I had to sit down, because audacity tires. It drains the soul. You start to wonder if you're really living in reality, or if you've fallen for a prank of biblical proportions. She, who literally cut off the power supply to a hospital unit that treats dozens of people a day, now set herself up as a heroine of the people, a martyr to noise, savior of sensitive ears. But as if that wasn't enough, she decided to go further. She sent an open letter to the town hall, signed by herself and, again, a couple of other dripping cats who owed her favors or were brainwashed. In the letter, she demanded that my home be closed until an independent environmental audit was carried out. It said that the noise from the generator was affecting the local fauna, that birds were changing their migration routes, and that even the bees had abandoned the flowers in the neighborhood because of the aggressive frequency of the engine. She literally said that my generator was driving away bees and migratory birds. Yes, that was the formal complaint she sent. The town hall ignored it, because, thank God, there are still civil servants with 2 functioning neurons. But the icing on the cake was yet to come. The following Saturday, the woman organized a protest. Yes, a protest, with a banner, a whistle, a personalized T-shirt and everything. 4 people showed up. One of them was a lady with a cane who clearly thought she was going to a cat adoption fair, and another was a guy with a lost look on his face who seemed to be there by accident. But even so, she stood there in front of my house, holding a sign that read, "Silence is a human right," shouting, whistling, verbally attacking passers-by. In other words, to demand silence, she made noise. What she didn't know was that, at that point, the case had already gained the attention of a local journalist, a reporter from a small TV channel in the neighboring town, who covered unusual stories and had a sharp nose for the absurd. She contacted me saying she wanted to understand the situation better, and if she could come and do a story. I accepted, not out of vanity, but because it was about time someone documented the madness with a modicum of sanity. She came with a camera, microphone, and a wonderful sense of humor. We recorded in front of the generator. I explained everything, showed her the documents, the authorizations, the technical support, the contract with the hospital, the emergency records, and the best part? She tried to interview the woman. The woman freaked out. She refused. She said she didn't talk to biased press, that it was an attack on her reputation, and that she was going to sue everyone. And in the end, the journalist recorded an excerpt saying, "This is the same citizen who tried to turn off the generator that supplies the city's only hospital. And now she's protesting against the sound that saves lives." The story aired in the evening. It went viral. The whole neighborhood saw it. The next day, she disappeared. She disappeared for a while. The house was closed up, the curtains drawn. No sign of movement. It seemed that the shame, however belated, had shown. But to ensure that the chapter was truly closed, the hospital took formal action against her. The act of locking the generator with a chain was classified as sabotage of emergency equipment. Their lawyer is known for being a procedural destruction machine. And when he sent the court notice, I think even her inflated ego shriveled up. Since then, the neighborhood has returned to normal. The generator is still working. The hospital has never been dark again, and the woman now walks down the street with her head down, like she's finally understood that she's not the lead character in a soap opera, nor the sheriff of a condominium, much less the leader of an environmental movement. She's just another figure who got lost in her own illusion of power. But you know what's even crazier? If she showed up again, trying to stop something important because of a personal tantrum, I wouldn't be surprised, because some people just can't accept living in a world where they're not at the center of everything. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like and a comment.